Welcome everyone to episode 25 of Future Strong. I'm delighted to be back with Lindsay Pollock and Esther from 10,000 Black Interns. We're really looking forward to chatting to you, Esther. We're going to let you introduce yourself shortly. For anyone who doesn't know about Capfinity, we are a strengths-based organisation offering talent intelligence solutions across the employee lifecycle, but particularly committed to everything to do with emerging talent, which is exactly what Future Strong is here to do. So without further ado, I will hand over to Lindsay, who I have to say I met in person last week. I think we will transition to a photo shortly just to show you that I was actually in New York. But Lindsay, it's kind of sad to not be with you in person anymore. There's Latoya and Stephen from my team who I got to meet face to face.
Nikki at Radio City Music Hall. She did not perform live, but she did snap a photo. And we realized we did not take a photo together, which is a gross error, which means you're just going to have to come back to New York so that we can snap an equivalent photo. Hello, everybody. My name is Lindsay Pollock. I'm a career advice author and speaker. My latest book is Recalculating, Navigate Your Career Through the Changing World of Work. I am based here in New York City. Welcome to all of you who have joined us, especially our regular watchers. Please announce yourself in the chat and let us know where you are watching from. Nikki, we are at our 25th episode, which is pretty extraordinary. And I have to say, I am going to my college homecoming football game, American football, this weekend, feeling a little bit old. It is my 25th reunion year. It's actually my 26th, but because of COVID, we pushed it. So I'm feeling like the 25 vibes. How do you feel about number 25?
I think it's very special. I have high hopes to come to a homecoming game. So I'm a little jealous that you're going to it, but photographic evidence between now and the next episode would be wonderful.
Now that we're showing photos, we've opened up a whole can of worms, but let's transition from 25 to 10,000 because it is an extraordinary number. Esther, you've noticed we both avoided saying your last name, so we're going to invite you to introduce yourself. I'm guessing that has happened before, but we are so delighted to welcome you, Esther. I know that you have an extraordinary background and have done some terrific work in the UK. So would you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be on this platform with the both of you. And yes, so my name is Esther Odejimi-Uzokwe. Pretty simple, hopefully. And I am the program director here at 10,000 Black Interns. And a little bit of background about what 10,000 Black Interns is and what we do. We are an organization that is essentially working very, very hard to increase the pipeline of Black candidates into industry, into 24 different sectors at the moment across industry. I can go into a bit more detail later in terms of how we started and where we're headed, but that's essentially who I am. So I'm program director. My background is actually, I'm East London born and bred. So big shout out to anyone who's listening and knows where East London is. I was born in Hackney, raised in Chadwell Heath, and went to state comprehensive school, worked super hard, had Nigerian parents who were focused on education from day one. And my mum very much focused on one of her children going to Oxford or Cambridge. So worked very hard, ended up getting into Oxford, studied theology and religion whilst I was there. Side note, both my parents are pastors, hence, part of the decision to study something like theology and religion. Graduated in 2017, was an entrepreneur for a year post-university, ended up working in investment banking at a company called Goldman Sachs in their investment banking division, specifically in structured equity derivatives. Don't ask me why. I'm a very non-technical person, but somehow ended up in the most technical team in the investment bank. Left them after a couple of years. Then the pandemic hit, and then this opportunity came up to join 10,000 Black Interns, and here I am.
We don't have East London or Nigeria in the crowd yet, but we do have our friend Fred Burke. Fred, welcome to today's session. Fred is either in New York or Massachusetts, and we've got Mike McKay from the University of Tennessee. Thank you all, and everyone please continue to announce yourselves. Nikki.
So Esther, tell us a little bit about how 10,000 Black Interns was formed and how you went from a smaller number to a much larger number. Be great just to hear a little bit about the story of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started off as 100 Black interns, and that was just over a year ago, actually. And initially, the intention was to hire 100 candidates into investment management firms. The reason that it started in the first place is actually one of our amazing co-founders wanted to host a dinner for Black investment managers in the City of London, and quickly realized that there just weren't enough of them to host any kind of tangible event in the first place. And it coincided with the terrible murder of George Floyd. So the time was right to really do something tangible about this chronic underrepresentation of Black candidates. And the starting point for us was investment management. We know it's a very white, very male, very elite industry. So our co-founders literally started calling up a bunch of investment management firms, and within less than a day, they had more than 100 of them basically calling game and saying that they absolutely wanted to be a part of this. So they quickly realized they were knocking on an open door, signed up 200 firms in the end, and put about 40 additional firms on a waiting list. They then opened up applications to students. And again, the eligibility criteria from a student perspective is as long as you are Black, studying at any UK university across any year group of higher educational study, you can be a first year, fifth year, undergrad, master's, postgrad, whatever, or graduated from any of those aforementioned types of degrees since, at the time, 2018, then you'd be eligible to apply to the program. So they opened up applications expecting a couple of hundred, maybe 300 applications, ended up getting 2,500, 2,165 of them being eligible. So, you know, we did get a few cheeky people trying their luck with our eligibility criteria, but we weeded them out in the same way that we will do every single year. And yeah, the story was just amazing. And the speed of the progression was just amazing. So going back to our inception in investment management, at the junior level, they tend to hire about 20% people who identify as women. And through our process, we had 42% of our applications come from Black women, and that translated into 45% of the offer rate. And also going into how elite the investment management industry can often be in its hiring practices, we actually had 59% of our applications come from non-Russell Group universities. And for those in the US, the Russell Group institutions in the UK are considered the best institutions in the UK. They often have the most funding and conduct the most research. So investment management tends to target those institutions, and 59% of our applications came from students outside of that group of universities, which for us was great because it's about access as well, the kind of candidate who otherwise would not have got a look in this kind of industry. And that translated into 40% of the offer rate. So off of the back of all of this, we had a number of firms in other sectors saying they wanted to be involved. And to cut a very long story short, that's how 100 Black interns very quickly morphed into 10,000 Black interns. And the idea is the same, hiring now 2,000 interns a year for 5 years, hence the 10,000 number. And we're now in collaboration with 618 firms across the UK, representing 2,500 internship opportunities and also representing 24 sectors. So now investment management is one of 24 represented under the program. And we literally just closed our applications and ended up getting more than 10,000 eligible applications to this year's program. So we're very, very busy and keeping the ball rolling.
I know you have the URL 10,000 Black interns. I feel like you should also have the URLs for much larger numbers, and I have a feeling they're probably in your stable. 50,000 Black interns, 100,000 Black interns.
Don't tempt our trustees. Don't even do it. Don't tempt the trustees. Honestly,
you heard it here first.
Story.
Yes, commitment
yes. Breaking
to
news.
50.
Breaking news.
50,000.
It's just extraordinary. Esther, I'm curious, when you think about, we certainly have people from organizations watching. Can you talk a little bit about how they've been getting involved? And, it's not just recruiting, right? You also have to create an inclusive environment. Can you talk about your experience in the industry as a Black woman and what these, did you say 600 and something organizations are doing as part of the program? I'd love to hear some of the details. It's not just hiring, but there's got to be a lot more, right?
100%. So if we look at the actual issues that exist within industry, so it's twofold. One, it's the kind of access point. So are these firms able to reach the Black candidates in the first place? And then for those who are able to reach Black candidates, are you able to retain them once they get their foot in the door? That's the secondary, and to me, actually the most important question. Because as an organization like ours, we don't want to just be this massive conveyor belt that's churning all of these Black students and Black candidates into these firms when they may come out of that situation needing therapy, for example, because it was just a terrible experience that really damaged their mental health. We don't want that kind of situation. So one thing that we're very keen on doing and will be doing and have been doing under the program is working quite closely with the firms in terms of structuring these internships and also providing both the holistic and internal resource that they require to succeed, because you need to ensure that as an organization, your environment is actually conducive to the success of a non-white person. And that sounds like a very like obvious or blatant thing for somebody to acknowledge, but actually I think some of these nuances can be quite subtle. And even little things like a Black candidate being able to find a sponsor or an advocate or a mentor within an organization, that can be very difficult. There can be certain barriers, even cultural barriers, that come in between being able to forge some of those relationships. So the firms that we're working with are really pleased that, you know, one, they've signed up, because that's a step to acknowledge that something needs to be done, and they're ready and willing to be part of a long-term solution to this. And step two is, of course, making sure that holistic environment of mentorship and sponsorship is provided, such that we don't have candidates going into industry, leaving after a few months or after a couple of years, and we're in the same place we were in the beginning, because we need to increase the pipeline and make sure that in the next few years there is a Black CEO of a FTSE 100 company or a Black CFO of a FTSE 100 company, which currently isn't the case.
It's incredible, Esther, to hear you talk so passionately about kind of what organizations can do. Would you just share a little bit of, as a candidate, as an intern, what I might expect, what they go through on these programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the full program from start to finish, so I'll use this year as an example. Applicants have just applied. We've just closed our application process, and we're going through the recruitment process as we speak. So going back to the application, on the form, we have asked every single candidate to specify at least 3 sectors of interest. So we're a very intern-centric organization and want to enhance the chances of each of our candidates actually securing some paid work. So what our algorithm will do is that, or has done already, is allocate each of the candidates to a minimum of 1 firm per sector that they have selected. So every candidate at any given time will be reviewed by 3 firms to enhance their chances of securing something. Now, come the end of January next year, we'll have a full picture of who our class of 2022 is. That's our recruitment deadline for the participating firms. And then come March next year, that's when we'll then begin our pre-internship training. So again, for those who have secured an internship under the program, and also for those who haven't secured an internship under the program, but are still interested in training themselves and upskilling, fingers crossed for a future opportunity that may come up, the pre-internship training will take 2 forms. One form is the kind of common denominators of success across any industry that you're in, because as I mentioned, we have 24 different sectors that are represented. So there will be some nuances in terms of the skills and requirements needed for someone to be successful, but there will also be common denominators. Dealing with imposter syndrome, confidence, stakeholder management, all of these kind of things. And those are the kind of topics that we'll really be addressing in pre-internship training, and just giving the interns access to industry leaders and experts to help them and to equip them for these kinds of things. And even kind of before that, as we speak now, we're running an interview workshop series, which I'm proud to say Capfinity is a huge part of, delivering sessions for us under the interview training for our candidates. And then fast forwarding again to pre-internship training, the second form that it will take is something that's a little bit more tailored to some of the industries that we'll be working with. So some specific sessions for candidates going into specific sectors to help upskill them and make sure that they're as ready as they can be to attack and to do well and to hopefully, you know, be retained within that industry.
It's such a comprehensive program. Thank you for outlining that. Such a good model that I hope we will follow in some way in the United States. Trudy Steinfeld has joined us from Cambridge. Welcome, Trudy. Reminder to everyone listening that we would be delighted to take your questions for Esther on any topic. Esther, I'm curious, when you think about the interns themselves, you talk about imposter syndrome, mental health. I'm curious what other topics or issues have come up, and did anything surprise you, and particularly in the pandemic environment, that students asked for or that organizations were talking about, you know, especially in the virtual environment? I'd just be curious about the feedback and requests from the interns themselves.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And I'll take your question from the angle of the pandemic specifically. And did anything surprise me? I would say not really, but I became more hyper aware of some of the issues that need to be addressed. And again, going back into the whole pandemic situation, it became very, very clear what some of the disparities are. For example, we had candidates who needed to be sent laptops, who needed internet top-ups and all of the above just to be able to do their internship. And as a program and in partnership with our participating firms, I mean, the firms were absolutely fantastic. We had firms shipping out laptops and all of the above to candidates' addresses, and it was great. But it just made me hyper aware of what the disparity actually is. And even having some candidates, reach out to me to say, look, Esther, I'm so grateful for this internship. I can't wait for it, but it's remote. No one is in office, and I don't have my own space in my home. Like, I just don't have anywhere quiet where I can actually engage in this type of thing, and kind of working with those students to ensure that the gap that has always been there, but again, has just been exacerbated by the conditions of the pandemic, is filled as much as it can and doesn't harm their prospects moving forward as well. So that to me came as a kind of an increased revelation over the course of the pandemic in particular, because this really is at the core an access issue. We're having candidates who they don't have the connections that their white counterparts do. They don't have the resources that their white counterparts do. And even just very basically, they don't have the same space in their house that some of their white counterparts do. And these are things that really do affect your opportunities.
And Esther, as you look forward into 2022, are there any things that you see potentially changing, kind of as I want to say recovery, but we can see countries all over the world going back into lockdown, but anything you see kind of evolving, or topics that you think are going to need to be prevalent as we continue kind of this commitment to hiring Black talent?
Yes, I mean, moving on from the pandemic, hopefully, gosh, touch wood. Of course, we're having a lot more of the organizations actually choose to remain in the kind of hybrid or remote structure. So that's becoming much more of a conversation piece with a lot of the firms that we're working with. A number of them are back in office, and that's great, but there are also a number of them who are choosing to now maintain a hybrid structure where it's kind of 3 days in office, 3 days at home. So, the kinds of conversations that we were having under the 2021 program, I'm sure will continue, and the kind of flex that will be required from organizations in order to facilitate that will also continue. And on the flip side, the positive side of kind of working from home is the increased flexibility. We now have, even from a candidate perspective, I'm finding that the sentiment is people are very much more looking for the kind of organization that is able to flex in that kind of way. Can I work from home every now and then? They're looking for a reduced rigidity in terms of the options that they have as an employee, and also an increased work-life balance in terms of the options that they have as an employee. And I think perhaps it's a generational thing. I mean, what am I, Gen Z, 26? Gen Z, millennial. But I feel like we think in a particular way and require particular things in order to maintain our happiness. Whereas, again, I could be completely wrong, but the generations that came before us, it seems to be much more kind of, I'm doing what I have to do, may not like it at this time, but it's for the greater good, and X, Y, and Z I'm developing. And again, there are positives and negatives to both, but I'm definitely seeing a larger trend to, am I happy? If the answer is no, then deuces. So again, that's a big topic of conversation, ensuring that organizations understand these generational nuances, because it's one thing to not agree with the thought processes of the generations that are coming up, but whether you agree or not, you need them as a workforce, because, we have an aging population, your workforce is going to die one day, and you need people in the coming generations to replace them and to take up these positions. So whether you like it or not, that flex is going to be necessary. So I think that's a really interesting piece that I'm going to keep my eyes on in the next few years and see how it develops and the direction it goes in.
Well, I see a nice collaboration now between you and Lindsay with her generational specialism. But Lindsay, does some of what Esther's sharing with you kind of ring true from what you're hearing?
Yeah, that's exactly where my mind was going. So Esther, I do a lot of work on generational diversity in the workplace. And we have something going on here in the US they're calling the Great Resignation. I don't know if that terminology has hit the UK, but people are leaving if they don't like what the flexible situation is going to be. And young people are very much at the forefront of that. I'm a little less optimistic than you are that organizations are quite seeing it yet. I think there's still a belief, well, they'll come around. And I think you're right that if people want talent, they're going to have to flex. But I'd be curious for more of your thoughts on the reaction from the companies, how willing they are to be flexible. I sort of think, I agree with you, we're still in the middle. I think nobody's kind of figured out. I'm hearing a lot of organizations call it a pilot program, with the flex time or the hybrid. But, do you have any examples? Certainly you don't have to name names, but companies that you think have been really innovative in how they're thinking about flexibility and work-life integration, particularly for their young people. And apologies for the drilling that is going on in the
You did
apartment.
pre-warn us. I forgot to share.
Now it's the drilling. There's something, noise follows me. So I'm going to mute. But yeah, dig deeper on that topic, Esther, because I think I think the companies that get it have a real opportunity. And I think the companies that stay rigid are really going to struggle. I'd love more of your thoughts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I won't give any specific examples of firms, but I absolutely recall a number of conversations actually that I've had with hiring managers at particular participating firms. And they've had very serious conversations with me and as a member of the generation that they are trying to target. And just asking. And I think that's actually the most powerful thing that an organization can do. I mean, I'm not sure what side of the fence I am on in terms of, am I optimistic that firms are doing this en masse? I'm not sure. Let's see. We'll see. We'll see as the years unfold. But one thing that I'm happy to be seeing is at the very least the interest and the desire to have the conversation. And that in and of itself is some level of indication that there is an acknowledgement that times are changing. And there is also a follow-up acknowledgement that because times are changing, practices and culture and flexibility needs to change hand in hand. One example in particular that sticks in mind is a firm that reached out to me and said, look, we really want to speak directly to students on campus in a particular demographic so that we can understand what they actually want from a workplace, because we realize that for years we've been playing the guessing game as a HR department, trying to assume what they want, trying to assume what's going to be attractive to them, and we got it wrong. And we want to get on campus and actually speak to them, understand what they want, and morph our programs and our culture around that so that we can actually increase the participation of this generation in our industry and workforce. And I think that's fantastic. And other firms and organizations should take note of that.
I massively appreciate that people are listening and seeking the candidate voice. I do think that's been a positive over the last couple of years, and I hope it continues into 22. There'll be people listening now or listening back to this, Esther, who would love to know how they could be involved and to support the mission. Yeah, I guess particularly organizations. What's the criteria? And if you don't fit that criteria, are there other ways that people can support?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the program criteria in terms of hiring an intern. So I mentioned the intern eligibility criteria earlier, and that's if you're Black, and this includes mixed race, of course, studying at any UK university across any year group of higher educational study, or graduated from higher educational study since 2018. From a firm perspective, the criteria is as follows. The minimum criteria is as follows. So you have to be able to offer a minimum of a 6-week internship opportunity. It can be longer than that, but 6 weeks is the minimum requirement. And the reason we've asked for that is such that it's a tangible experience where they're not making teas and coffees, they're doing actual work, and they can leverage that in their future career. So minimum of 6 weeks, and paying a minimum of the local living wage, which in London is just under £11 an hour. And again, because that is what has been calculated as a fair, at the very minimum, payment for somebody to be able to get by. And again, the vast majority of firms are paying much more than the local living wage, but we just set that as the bare minimum for participation in the program. So for firms who believe that they want to be involved and they can absolutely meet that criteria, we're actually operating on a waiting list at the moment because we finalized the cohort for the 2022 program. So please go head to our website, 10,000blackinterns.com. Click on offer an internship and you'll be able to register for our waiting list. For those who perhaps want to be involved in other capacities, perhaps you think you have resource that you can help us with, or you can give our interns access to that may be of use to them, or perhaps even partner up with us in a way similar to Capfinity, in the sense that, we're working very closely with Capfinity to deliver actual training sessions for our candidates. So if that sounds like something yourself or your firm might be able to do, then please do reach out again via our website. We have a team that responds to those emails. So yeah, we'll be more than happy to have those conversations with you as well, because we have more than 10,000 candidates ready and willing to be trained up in one way, shape or form.
Thank you so
it's
much.
Fantastic.
We have a question from Trudy Steinfeld. What advice can we give to Black young women who are scared to ask for what they need or go after it because maybe they're balancing so many work or family or financial pressures? What would be your advice?
Boy, what a question. What a question. And it's a question that I'm trying to figure out the answer to myself, because I am one of those Black women. I think that just do it. Sometimes you just have to put yourself out there. One thing for me is that I can be an overthinker. I can sit around contemplating what to do and how to do it for a long time. And sometimes that in itself can be a stifling place to be. It can be a self-limiting place to be. So for those women who, you know, want to put themselves out there, but are thinking, oh, can I do this because of X? Can I do this because of Y? My idea is just do it. Just do it. And if it doesn't work out, the world has not collapsed around you. It's absolutely fine. This life in and of itself is one of pivoting, making decisions, and you know, optimizing or attempting to optimize. So that would be my advice. And for women in the workplace, for Black women in the workplace, I would definitely say, as difficult as it may be sometimes, because I have been there, I've been in industry and felt as though I couldn't reach out to certain people or couldn't be honest about particular things. My advice would be, again, put yourself out there in seeking a sponsor. It's so powerful for one's career, whether or not you are a single woman, a married woman, a mum, regardless. It's just so helpful for one's career to have that person that can advocate for you and advocate for your strengths behind closed doors, and has access to tables that you may not have access to. And, you know, sometimes it just takes reaching out, sending that email, walking over to that desk, asking for a coffee. Just be bold and do it.
You know, it's so interesting. We recently hosted an event, Nikki, I don't know if I can name the client, for a large financial institution in the UK. And we interviewed a lot of senior executives. And they said, I know you think that we're being bombarded with requests from junior people to mentor and sponsor and have coffee. We're not. Please reach out. They really said, you think that, you know, we don't want this or that we're unreachable, but we are. I mean, one sort of gave her email address on the call and said, I'm here. So I think you're right in that we think everybody's asking, but they're not. And senior people are very, very open to that. Does that surprise you?
That surprises me. That actually does. And I guess, you know, it's a kind of joint onus, isn't it? One, be bold, but also there's the visibility point as well. Maybe sometimes we need the senior execs to put themselves out there and say, hey, look, I'm available to you. I am a resource for you should you need it, because it can be intimidating sometimes, particularly when there's a large career gap between you and the person you've potentially got your eye on as a sponsor or mentor. So I think it's a two-way street in that sense, but that surprises me, pleasantly surprises me.
Yeah, I agree. I think those who are leaders who have the capacity to sponsor a mentor should say it, right? And be open to it and invite it, because assuming people will reach out is a really big ask. It can be very intimidating. Esther, I have one final question if we have a moment. What's the transition been like for you from corporate America to nonprofit leadership? I'm curious about your own journey career-wise.
Yeah, I mean, so I spent the best part of 2 years in the London office at Goldman. And for me, it was a really upwards learning streak. I mentioned that I was in a super technical team and I'm just not a very technical person. Don't know how it happened. But I learned a lot as a result in a very short space of time. And I feel like a lot of the skills that I was able to pick up in corporate, in the corporate world, have definitely translated as transferable skills now, kind of running an organization, because I'm very much in a leadership and management role. And that corporate background and that finance background has absolutely served well for me. I would say one of my biggest reasons for leaving that industry in the first place was I felt as though I couldn't have as much social impact as I wanted to. I'm very driven by social impact. So now joining this role for me just seemed to be the perfect amalgamation of what I love and what I'm passionate about. It's the entrepreneurial space, kind of building something from the ground up, also being able to develop the management skills as well, and being able to help my people in the best way that I can. So, yeah.
I have had goosebumps for nearly the whole duration of this Future Strong episode, because Esther, you are a complete inspiration in what you've shared. And
thank you.
I've personally learned so much from the 30 minutes that we've had with you. I now understand that this is why the BBC News want you on. This is why you have visited number 10 with the team recently. Everyone wants to hear the story and share the great work. Lindsay, you always give a summary, which we put out on social, a tough one today to put so many themes together, but what would you take away as the key learning?
Thank you, Esther Odejimi-Uzokwe of 10,000 Black Interns, perhaps soon to be 100,000 or 1 million Black Interns. We're delighted to have you talk about your program. 3 key takeaways. One is with Black students, Black graduates, we can't just think about the hiring. We have to think about the environment that students are coming into and create an environment where Black employees can thrive. This is a long-term solution. And Esther really pointed to mentorship and sponsorship and leaders putting themselves out there and welcoming young people to be mentored and sponsored because they may not have the confidence to react. So number 1, environment. Number 2, pay attention to access and resources when you are recruiting Black talent or any diverse talent. Be aware that there are disparities we might not think about. Things like laptops, a quiet space to work from home. Really important to make students feel comfortable asking for the accommodations that they might need. And number 3, I love this one. In terms of flexibility, don't play a guessing game, Esther says. We have to have the conversation with young people about what they're looking for when it comes to work-life integration, decreased rigidity. Just ask employees what they're looking for. Don't make assumptions about hybrid work, work from home, all of the different needs. I think such a message of our show is listening and curiosity. And Esther, you really demonstrated that beautifully. So 10,000 Black Interns, thank you for sharing your thoughts. And Nikki, do you want to talk about our next episode?
So next episode, 2 weeks from now, will be with Kimberly Cummings, talking about careers. And we're really looking forward to having her join the show. Really from us, Esther, thank you so much for your time. I hope everyone will visit the website. I hope soon Capfinity will be on that waiting list to have our interns join us as well. So that is my commitment at the end of this episode. And hopefully the interns that will join the strengths profile sessions and interview training sessions will enjoy them in the coming weeks. But thank you, everybody, for all our US listeners and any of those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving next week. We wish you a very brilliant Thanksgiving, and our gratitude goes out to Esther and the team for the time today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me.